Welcome to the LivBtr podcast. I'm Erica Spiegelman, addiction and wellness specialist and author, and along with me, I have my co-host, Siano, a New York-based serial entrepreneur, business scaling expert, and wellness aficionado. We are here to inspire, encourage growth, and most importantly, to live better. Welcome to the LivBtr podcast. Our guest today is Morra Aarons-Mele, and she is passionate about helping people rethink the relationship between their mental health and their success. She also helps people deal with anxiety, and she hosts the Anxious Achiever podcast. She also has a new book, The Anxious Achiever, Turn Your Biggest Fears into Your Leadership Superpower. Welcome to the show, Morra.
How are you today? Welcome.
I'm good, Jay. How are you?
I'm doing very well. And I'm excited to dive in here, talk a little bit about your new book and understand anxiety in the workplace, because I have some experience with that. So if you could give our community a little background on yourself.
Sure. It's great to be here. Can't wait to hear your story of anxiety in the workplace.
I can't wait to share it.
That's a big piece of what I do with the Anxious Achiever. I have a podcast called The Anxious Achiever, and we invite leaders from all walks of life on to come and tell their stories with mental health challenges and how they've managed through, how they've struggled, what they've learned, and most importantly, how they've found a way to work in a way that their brain likes. Because
it's interesting. Yeah, I was going to say, I was just going to jump in there. I mean, for me, I realized I lost my mother in my early 20s. And after that experience for me, I started having panic attacks, and my mind would just run and my body would react to it. And I didn't know what was happening. And if that never happened to me, I wouldn't even know that, panic and anxiety was a thing. And it was debilitating for me in all areas of my life. And I had to really figure out how to get through it, what felt like on my own. And fortunately today, I haven't dealt with those things in a really long time. But what really inspired you? What's your background with this? Did you have a similar experience? How did you get into the field?
Yeah, I'm so sorry about that, Jay.
Thank you.
That is really traumatic. I basically am a leader who manages anxiety and depression and ups and downs with bipolar 2 disorder. So I first got my clinical diagnosis when I was 19 years old. So basically for all my adult life, have been really managing my mental health while also being just really, really ambitious and wanting a really big career. And, that's really the crux of my work, because when I was growing up, I didn't really have any role models. We didn't talk about this stuff. There was no mental health month. And I always joke, it was the pre-mentorship era. Excuse me. Oh my goodness. Sorry. Allergy season. So I felt really alone, luckily I had great access to care and therapy and medication and muddled my way through, although muddled is, a kind way of putting it, really. So, I started my career in the first .com era in the late 90s, and then worked in politics for many years. I was a political consultant, ran my own business in political consulting, and along the way did stints in corporate marketing as well, and just really never felt like there was a workplace where I could, tone down the symptoms of my anxiety and the things that would aggravate my anxiety while letting me play to my strengths. Ultimately, I did find that in entrepreneurship. So I started writing about it. I started talking about it, and it was something that people really, really wanted to hear more of. We need role models. We need to not feel alone in this stuff.
When again, just back to my own experience, it was around the time that I was just starting out in my career also. And one of my earliest positions was also in the .com era. I was working for a company called 24/7 Media, an online advertising company.
I worked for iVillage.com.
Oh, of course. Okay. So, and it's funny because, I would have to be in these really large group meetings at 24/7 Media, and in certain environments, I would just get anxiety, and it would just come on. You know, it was weird. It was big meetings like that. Again, just because I wasn't comfortable in my own skin. I was dealing with the loss of my mother. And anytime I was in like a very public setting, I felt like everybody knew that I was having these feelings and was looking at me, and it would exacerbate those feelings, which is probably very strange for people who know me to even hear, because I am a very public facing, person who seems like he has it all together and has no problem public speaking and all that stuff. But I went through it, and it was very tough for me to even know if there would be a time in the future that going into an environment like that, would be something that I could do. So I could understand how that would derail people's careers entirely.
Yeah. I mean, it can derail careers or it cannot. I always joke that people's insides don't always match their outsides, right? And so there are so many people who we know, who we admire, who do get up on stage and command thousands of people, who run companies, who are CEOs, who deal with the demons. And that's really the thing, is that sometimes you can't cure the demons. Sometimes they're with you, but you can learn to manage them, and you can hopefully not let them stop you.
Yeah. Well, I love that today is a different environment than when we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Many years ago at this point. And, people don't necessarily feel as alone, but I'm sure a lot do. Mm-hmm. I'm sure, because it's, you believe that it's a weakness and that you can't share this with people because they're going to look down on you and so on and so forth. When quite on the contrary, I think people today truly appreciate people that are real and share, difficult things they're dealing with, and, are vulnerable. And I think, I'm a much more evolved human today, and I share these things openly in hopes that it will help other people. But if somebody's feeling that way, how can they find help? And, what would you suggest that somebody who's dealing with these things and has not admitted that, or, really found a place that they can, get some help?
I mean, I think the first thing is to get help, right? If you're feeling, if it's as bad as what you were experiencing, where you're having panic attacks. I mean, I've checked myself into the ER because of panic attacks. Sometimes you truly, you feel like you're dying. It's an extremely physical experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I have too.
So you have to get help, right? And the good news is, because anxiety is so common, there are really good treatments for it. And that's really important. Anxiety is extremely common, and it's the world's most common mental health disorder. And to be honest, in this world, I always joke, if you're not feeling anxiety, I don't know if you're paying attention, because we live in very anxious times. And again, there are some of us who have anxiety disorders, and we really do need to get help. And if you're feeling like, well, I know I have anxiety, maybe I've even been in therapy, I'm on medication, I deal with this, but it's in my way. It is chronic. It's like this weight around my shoulders, or I'm always having trouble sleeping or breathing, or I'm just feeling like, anxious all the time. I think that having a relationship with your anxiety and really looking at it and asking it, like, what are you trying to tell me here? Like, why aren't you lessening? Why am I feeling you so strongly every day? Can be really instructive. And this can be something you can do in therapy, which I think is really, really, really a great thing to do. I always joke, I think therapy is the best leadership tool that you can invest in, because it helps you with self-awareness, understanding, all of those good things. And also just, so doing inner work to really figure out, why is this meeting making me so anxious? Why does this person's name in my email inbox make me feel like I'm going to throw up?
It could be triggers as simple as that, which is, and everybody's different, right? So, you know, for me, I've found that movement, breath work, meditation, you know, a lot of physical activity. I've really focused on self-care and overall wellness for many years now, and I have not had anxiety. I also actually should note that I removed alcohol, and that was the biggest
Yeah.
factor for me where you know, of course I'll have anxiety in situations, but not debilitating, not panic attacks. But for me, when I removed alcohol from my life, it literally like changed everything. I didn't realize how much of a factor that was for me, because it wasn't when I was drinking, it was the after effects the next day, the just overall anxiety feeling that would it would literally be there regardless of how many drinks that I had the day before. I'd be off on some level.
I mean, we act out, we seek coping mechanisms. Our brain doesn't want us to feel anxious. So, we drink, some of us, when we're anxious, because our brain along the way has learned, you know what, Jay feels better right after he's had that drink. So I'm going to tell Jay to have a drink. It's
Of
very
course.
simplified, right? And
Yeah.
so it's not our brain's fault. Like, our brain is just really trying to help us have these bad feelings. And so we all have our coping mechanisms. We have behaviors like drinking or having a Snickers or yelling at people. And we have thoughts that we get stuck in. I think a lot of people who have chronic anxiety get stuck in what I refer to as thought traps. So
Yeah.
they'll get stuck feeling like an imposter. They'll get stuck feeling like the world's going to end. They'll get stuck feeling like they're the worst. All of these traps that again, our brain has learned we go to. And it's really liberating when you can get to a place, as you said, where you feel anxiety, you feel it because life's anxious making, like you can't
Especially
control
in
that.
today's world, you know, even more so.
Yeah. But like, I don't have to reach for the scotch.
Yeah. I mean, and that's been a big, it's not easy to do, you know, especially when you're, for many, many years, you're numbing yourself from trauma. You're, you know, just trying to escape really, you know, and for me, I think putting down the bottle and sitting with the things that I never really dealt with, to your point, which is, you know, therapy could be very helpful for those things as well.
Yeah.
Once you get to the root of the issues, I think you could really start to, uh, to remove some of those anxieties, or at least again, that's been my experience, to really, you know, stop numbing myself, sitting down and really facing the issues and going to the root of the problem, and you know, has worked wonders for me. But you help a lot of leaders and high achievers transform anxiety from an apparent weakness to a strength. Are there certain ways that you are able to do so?
It's really about learning skills and reframing. We've talked about some of the skills, right? And actually it starts with trying not to numb the anxiety, feeling it. And I'm not saying don't go to treatment, don't seek therapy, don't take medication if that's what works for you. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, please, if you can, do all those things. You might still feel anxiety. It may not go away. Anxiety is a part of life, and it's part of leadership. It really, when we're in the big chair and we're faced with terrifying decisions and we're basically standing up all the time and saying, it's me, I'm going to help figure this out, we're going to have anxiety. And so really understanding what your particular sensitivities are. Maybe you have a real sensitivity around money. So many of us, this is a huge issue for so many people, and it shows up at work where from their childhood or whatever past history, money is something that makes them very anxious. And so money comes up all the time in work, comes up all the time. And that can be a real trigger for people. And so the power that you have when you understand that is immense, because you can prepare, you cannot get stuck in those traps, and you can have a better outcome and feel better about yourself. And so it's really powerful. And then ultimately, sometimes we need anxiety. We use it. anxiety is a necessary emotion. It's kept us alive for a pretty long time. And so, anxiety is not always a bad thing, especially, again, in those moments where you really care, you really want a good outcome.
I feel like, I completely agree with what you're saying. And I think, I want to be very sensitive to people who cannot overcome their anxiety, right? To your point, everybody deals with anxiety on a certain level, but it's not debilitating to everybody. And, once you get to a place that you can really cope with your anxiety and you understand, how to kind of be on a level playing ground, essentially, I think anxiety could be a positive and productive thing. A normal amount of anxiety can be a positive and productive thing, especially in the workplace. I work with entrepreneurs and very high level people that are big achievers, and they all deal with anxiety. Like you said, it comes with the territory. And I feel like on some level for myself, when I say yes to something that's a really daunting, thing, a speaking engagement. I recently did a Navy SEAL training program on the beach, a week and a half ago, which was literally scared me for weeks up to the activity, which is normal. I think that would scare most people. But, it's those are the types of things that also let you know you're pushing yourself. You have to. One of the biggest challenges for me was trying to eliminate the extreme anxiety and panic attacks from my life while still pushing myself to grow and be in uncomfortable situations to force that growth, right? I mean, and still, try to avoid the medication route, which there's absolutely nothing wrong with. And I was on the medication when I was going through this and dealing with it. And that was another tough thing for me was, how and when can I get off the medication, and start to, try to attack this on my own. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I think it's so individual, right? And again, we get so many messages from society also. A lot of us never overcome our anxiety. I had a panic attack last week that took me down. I didn't go to the ER because I know I'm like, okay, hi, you again. But I had not had one for like 8 months, and it came out of the blue, and it was so scary because, once you've been there, you're like, oh God, is this starting again? So actually you may not overcome your anxiety, and sometimes it still may take you down, and that's okay. Again, that's okay. It's not great, but it's okay. I think that, for me, medication has been a lifesaver because I do have bipolar disorder and I do get into horrible depressions. And my anxiety can get really out of control. So I have found a way, and it includes psychopharmacology. I think, again, getting the treatment you need is the most important thing. And sometimes it's hard and it's expensive and it's impossible to access. I did an episode recently on my podcast about the stimulant shortage in this country. If you need Ritalin, if you need Adderall, if you're treating ADHD or even something like narcolepsy,
sure,
which affects people, and you can't get your Ritalin, that's basically someone saying to you, maybe you can't live your life normally for a while. You can't show up at work. And so we're really sensitive creatures, and I'm glad we have access. I think also there's a piece of habit here. So many of us who have been anxious, who might be anxious by nature, anxiety is part of our operating system, and we have learned to lean on it. And it pushes us, right? It pushes us. I'm not going to be liked unless I excel. I'm not going to be worth it unless this is as close to perfect as I can be. I'm going to lose everything, including my house and my livelihood, if I don't push. And it's complicated because we get rewarded sometimes for that behavior. Very often, I speak to so many entrepreneurs, and it's like they operate out of anxiety, and they think it's gotten them where they're going to be. So this stuff is complicated and it takes time to unpack.
I agree with that. I feel like when you said that about entrepreneurs, I feel that way. I really, and it's not allowed me to take my foot off the gas, and I'm 22 years into my commercial real estate career now, and I, people are starting to head out for the holiday weekend and, get ready to enjoy themselves and their families and, have some transition from work to play, so to speak. And as an entrepreneur, I never feel like I can do that. There's always this underlying anxiety of if I'm not working in some capacity, whether it's a Saturday or a Sunday or a Memorial Day, that I'm falling behind or, I'm not doing what I can. I'm not doing the most I possibly can to further myself and as a result provide for my family. And these are, I think, really common feelings for entrepreneurs that are, responsible for essentially eating what they kill, right?
Yep.
And I think that our world makes entrepreneurship kind of seem so much more sexy and almost, I don't want to say easy, but makes it seem like everybody should choose that path, like that it could possibly be for everybody. And as one that actually advises others, I don't think that's the case. I think a lot of people can be happier in life, not necessarily going out and starting their own business, et cetera, et cetera. I think there's, the same way that everybody's different when it comes to anxiety and, being diagnosed as bipolar and all of the things. I think that, it's almost too, today the word entrepreneur is just thrown around.
It's the American dream. It's the American dream. And, it's funny. I sold my company 2 years ago. And after I sold thank you. Right. Because everyone's like, oh my God, you achieved the dream.
The American dream.
And, I became an entrepreneur because I couldn't work for other people because my brain just quirky and my temperament. And, I just needed a heck of a lot more flexibility and autonomy than any form of working in an organization was going to give me. So I was a sort of an accidental entrepreneur like so many of us are. And it was a great fit for my anxiety because entrepreneurship will take as much as you can give it. Entrepreneurship never says no, right? And social media never says no. And that adds fuel to the fire because even if you finished your business goals for the day, surely you can be out there posting, right?
Which growing, I am 24/7
your platform
on top of everything else. Yeah.
Yep. And so when I sold my business, I actually went through grief and, it was the most complicated. That was 2 years ago. It's complicated. It's been hard. And my anxiety over who am I and how am I going to prove myself again has been super intense. But the question that I feel like we need to ask ourselves at some point is this serving me? Do I want to live this way? And do I have to? Is it hurting my relationships? Like, could I keep 40% of this in drive and this, maybe it's fueled by anxiety, who knows, but also learn to give myself a little space because I'm sure you would attest, Jay, like it does take a toll.
Oh yeah. And it's so directly, I heard actually the founder of a company called Whoop, this data device that measures your sleep and your activity and whatnot, talking about how founders are typically so rolled up in the identity. Their identity is so directly associated with their business.
Yep.
And when the way he said it in such he really was able to say it in such a nice way that it got me thinking so much about that. Like a founder of a business sometimes there's like, where is the line between the human and the company? And for me, I've really tried to intentionally take a step back in my business to make sure that it's not all about me, right? And I did that through the lens of, if I were to get hit by a bus, what would happen to this company? And it allowed me to really think about how to put the right teams in place and the leadership team, and start to remove myself as the face, because you also want to do that when you're thinking about an exit, right? The company needs to be bigger than just one person, or it's not worth as much.
Leaders have to lead other people and make other people feel included and part of the team. And so when you're so anxious, I mean, one of the most common things anxious leaders do is they try to exert control. Maybe their anxiety is such that they feel like things are going to go wrong unless they're involved in every step of the way, or, they will do everything. A lot of us have grown up in families where we overfunctioned. We grew up in families where we took care of a lot. We grew up in a world where we were always special and we wear that mantle. But what it does is it doesn't let other people be special. And so I think any journey that an entrepreneur who has been fueled by this anxious ambition needs to take is this really the best strategy for my company? Is, to your point, are other people getting what they need from me? And, the most helpful trick I could advise people is to start looking at their emotional investment in every outcome. When we're anxious, we overinvest in outcomes because everything feels like so fraught. The temperature is so hot. And if we can begin the process of saying, okay, that's going to happen. And if it doesn't go this way, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to feel okay. Like literally trying to unplug a little bit, as you said, from outcomes and make things more neutral. It's a really good way to start like modulating that anxiety.
Yeah. I do believe I said this on my Instagram yesterday or the day before. I was with a client of mine who's the CEO of a big wellness company, who was talking about, we were talking about just successful people, right? And it was just a general conversation about what are the most common traits of the most successful people you know. And this friend of mine, client of mine, said, well, I think that it's the ability to operate under pressure. And it's developing resilience, because, things as a CEO, as an entrepreneur, you're constantly, facing things that are around the corner, the next corner, that are coming your way that you could never imagine are coming. And I think that is traumatic, like for people. And I think, we all need to put our game face on and face those things head on while they're coming at us, especially in that, well, it's business. It's not, it's not supposed to be emotional. It's not supposed to, and it's just funny because it's like, do those anxieties that you were just describing of a founder actually hold back? Like the fact that I feel like I need to be in meetings that I should no longer be in. Like, does that hold the company back as a whole? Because I am so used to being 24/7 and I pride myself on it. And if I'm on an email chain, and I can almost guarantee I'm the first person to respond to it.
Email is such a microcosm for so much of our anxiety at work. It's like all of the worries we have and the desires we have and all of the emotional investment in the outcome, email, Slack, Teams, it's that cycle of responsiveness. And then the feeling of when you send the email, did I say the wrong thing? Was my tone off? I think we've all had the huge anxiety of sending an email that we realized like was meant to go to another person, or said something, or we wish we could take it back.
Yeah.
And I think part of it is to just also have a little bit of like humor and humanness and be like, wow, like I'm getting so anxious over an email. Wow. Like, okay, anxiety, separate a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the question, is like, is this behavior still serving me? Is it serving the people I care about? And if the answer is no, then it's time to start looking at the patterns, because I guarantee, Jay, by now, these things are habits for you.
Completely.
Yeah.
They're habits, and it becomes, again, like, what is successful, right? Like, when you look at, I always compartmentalize my life. And I started doing this more recently. When I turned 40, I looked at everything and I separated everything into 4 different buckets: mind, body, business, and relationships. And everything in my life can go into those 4 buckets. And that allowed me to look at those buckets as if they're legs on a table. And if one of them is not as sturdy, right, if I'm not paying attention to one of those legs on the table can get rocky and fall over. And once, I'm very visual. So once I started to really focus on those things, and am I spending more time with my family than I am focused on my clients? Am I spending more time, which is usually the opposite, right? Am I spending more time at work and not paying attention to my family, and so on and so forth? I've been able to be more balanced. I don't think it's possible to be completely balanced. I think that's trying to achieve the impossible. But I think it's everybody has their own idea, and that idea will continue to change and evolve for every individual as they continue to grow and mature. And priorities will shift and change. And that's been my experience. And I think you have to really, again, from my own personal experience, look at yourself and say, like, are you happy? Are you fulfilled? If and that when you ask yourselves those questions and you do the hard work, which I really pride myself on doing over the last several years, focusing on, again, just being the best possible person that I can be, the best version of myself, whatever that means to me, that has really helped me, shift my anxieties. Anxiety will never be gone, especially if you're pushing yourself. But I've been able to reframe, to use, a word that Erica would have joined you in. And we oftentimes talk about reframing, and, it's worked wonders for me, but I also am mature enough to give myself grace today and know that I'm never going to be perfect. And, and I think that, and I celebrate that, and I think when you start to do that, it relieves a little bit of the pressure. You could be human.
You can be human, and you can love your anxious self. I think we're very special people, us anxious achievers, and we have so much to offer. And actually, there's data that show that people who have anxiety are better in a crisis. Actually, we are ready, because we've been preparing all our lives, but we're ready and we're good. We don't fold. We don't back down. And I think that's important for people to remember. There's a concept called work-life fit, which I think is really powerful. It's my friend Callie Yost, who's an incredible expert on creating flexible work. The idea that everyone has their own work-life fit. She says it's like a snowflake. And, me, and it sounds like you too, like, work is a central piece of who we are, what we love, what's important to us. And so that's okay. The thing I hate about balance is it's like so binary, but some of us, like, maybe we're just going to be really work oriented, and that's who we are and it's what we love. We just have to figure out how to give the other parts of our life what they need sometimes too.
For sure. And I think that really, being able to understand and define, what that is for yourself, and communicate that with other people in your life, right? Like, I think at the end of the day, I've learned that self-care is by far the most important thing. And it's not a selfish concept. You really, if you're not whole or feeling well, you can't help anybody. And it took me a long time to realize that, because, in a lot of ways, people think that focusing on yourself and your own self-care is egotistical. It's selfish. You're not, you're putting yourself before other people that are relying on you. And I'm confident enough to say today that I think the way that I'm able to best serve the people in my life that rely on me is to make sure that I'm, I'm filling those buckets. I'm checking the boxes. I'm checking in with myself. I'm doing things that allow me to operate the way that I need to operate in order to, again, achieve what fulfills me. And the more that I do that, the more that I can fill other cups that are around me.
Yeah.
You agree?
I agree.
So what do you have to tell the rest of the community as we wrap up this wonderful conversation? Where can they find the new book?
And you can find The Anxious Achiever anywhere you get your books, online, offline. It's so fun. People are sending me photos of it in the airports all over the country. It's super.
I love it.
It's super gratifying. I think check out my podcast as well, because we have really great conversations with leaders who are open. I think that openness as a value and as a leadership skill is really underrated, and I spend a lot of time teaching people how to be open without being messy. And that's, I just want to leave the audience with this, which is when it comes to talking about mental health at work and thinking about your own mental health as a leader, being open and being a little bit vulnerable is incredible, because people warm to it. They trust you. They like you. They feel, more seen. But it's also really important as a leader to be the leader, right? To give people a sense of yep, the buck does stop with me, and I don't know everything, and life is scary, but I got you. And so how do you sort of work on that balance? And I think that is something that I would just love anyone who manages other people to think about.
Absolutely. So before we go, I have to ask you the last question. What inspires you to live better?
My children.
How many?
I have 3 children, and they inspire and motivate me and make me anxious.
I hear you on that, for sure. For sure. That's amazing. I completely agree with that. And where can everybody find you?
The best place to find me, honestly, is on LinkedIn. I'm really active on LinkedIn. And if you have a question for me, send me a message. I'll write you back.
That's amazing. I love it, Morra. I really appreciate you taking the time today. I think this was a great conversation. I got a lot out of it, and I'm sure the rest of the community did as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Jay.
Thank you.